Welcome, everybody, to the 90s Best Cartoons podcast. I am Jerish. We're here today with Charlie and Zachy, who will be joining us later. Before we get started here on our discussion, which will be Ed and Nettie, we'd like to thank a few Patreon supporters. Carl Z, thank you ever so much for your $90 donation every month. We appreciate it. We love the support. Thank you dearly. Laguni, we also thank you as well for your continued support. Luna Noctis as well. Mr. Blue, you're the man. Redgar, you know what you did. And Terrigan, we love you as well. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started today. I'm talking with Charlie, and one of our topics for interest is Ed, Edd n Eddy and our personal favorite plot or scene. So, Charlie, go ahead and tell me, what was yours?
Well, off the top of my head, I did really like the episode where Ed specifically took charge of a scam, if you remember that.
I do actually remember that episode. It was one of the more funny ones. I love the fact that Double D got slammed with the Alaskan Dutch elm.
And the scene where he sits them down for break to eat lunch.
Bing! Lunch break!
And then they sit there for 5 seconds and he just flips the table and they're done.
Well, back to work. That's what he says in the episode. Back to work.
And then he tells them to look for the X marks the spot on the ground, and Double D's in the middle looking for it, but he can't find it. Instead, there's just a Q on the ground.
Well, the best part about that episode for me, especially around that scene, was the part where after he was talking about a Q, he's like, "What's the rock for, Double D?" And even before he says that, he's like, "Good job, Double D. It looks just like a Q." What? Where's the X, Ed? And now I remember the doll and the clam, Bobo.
Yeah.
And Naz is like, "Is that a giant clam?" And like, there's no way I'm getting in that thing. And they had I think it played homage to the Call of the Birds. I believe that was the old horror film that was done. Well, with that one kind of wrapped up, were there any others particularly that you were fond of growing up?
Any what specifically?
Any episode particularly that like stood out to you as a kid that really resonated well with you?
I do remember when they made the roller coaster.
That was for Plank, I assume.
And then Johnny ended up in it, I think.
Yeah, it was actually the episode where the Eds were trying to get the money from Johnny because Eddie's calendar said Johnny got his allowance that day.
Yeah.
And so they went off. I think I may have the wrong start of the episode, but they go to Johnny, and Plank's the one that wants a thrill ride. He wants to be the complete thrill of like an amusement park from the Eds.
Yeah.
And I think they threw him in the air. That didn't work for Plank. They gave him the coaster, which I believe is which one you're referring to.
It was made from a bunch of like plyboards and cardboard, and the cart itself was a shopping cart.
And they had tricked the Eds into getting into the cart.
Yeah.
What is there a scam I'm missing that they tried to give Plank? Oh, the chairs. I think no, that could be. I think that's the Monkey Boys episode. I could be getting that wrong. Do you recall if there was any other thing they did?
I just always remember the roller coaster.
Well,
it was a really funny scene whenever I watched it. For me, just how they ended up going down the roller coaster.
Because I remember Ed going alley-oop when they went into the loop-de-loop, and they bursted through the freaking window or whatever they were on that big huge contraption. I even remember they had built something similar. I think it was a slide for the competition where like they had a rocket car. And they wanted to build the world record.
Was tougher, I think.
In the Plank episode, or you're talking about the one I was referring to?
With the giant slide.
Because with the giant slide, there's the one with Plank, which was more of a coaster. But in the giant slide, that was when they were trying to break a world record. And I remember that they got on it, and Eddie was like, "Is everyone watching?" And Ed and Double D replies, "Of course, Eddie. This contraption takes up half the cul-de-sac."
Yes, I do remember the slide.
Yeah, because they had the roller coaster in that.
I could be wrong, but don't they just fall backwards off the slide?
Yeah, actually, the whole thing collapses into the cul-de-sac. So there's just destruction everywhere.
Yes, I remember.
It's infamous to me. The freaking Plank episode, it just reminds me as well, and it's not my personal favorite, but it takes me back to when they wanted to build Double D's confidence. So they got a ring match, like it was WWE. like the zone, and they had it where it was Plank versus Double D, and Plank won that fight.
Yeah.
Plank took him out like completely.
That reminds me of one of the scenes. It was one of the school episodes, and they're in the library, and it just cuts to Johnny and Plank, and Plank's holding a book, How to Brainwash.
Oh,
and Johnny's just brain dead, just sitting there.
Just letting it happen. That one,
just a blank stare on his face.
And just you saying that, do you recall a little bit later, the whole episode's because Jimmy and Sarah are on about fairy tales.
Yeah.
But secretly, well, not secretly, Rolf has a huge supply of bologna.
Yeah.
That he doesn't want anyone. Like, I think even because of the phrase load of bologna, and he had a load of bologna.
Yeah.
The actual sense. And I just remember him eating the shit out of it.
Just eating it throughout the episode.
He waited until he thought everyone was closing in on him, and then he freaked out and said, "It's Rolf's alone," and he ate the packaging too. Like he bit right into it.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I believe it's in that same episode, or maybe the spelling bee episode, where Johnny asks Naz if she wants to hold his hand. And she rejects him like, ew, in your dreams. And he's like, what? You hate bald kids too? The fact that he acknowledges that he's bald. I actually am curious if that was like a skin deficit. Like if there was really an issue with his hair where he was bald. Or if he was just a fashion choice. Because I say that, but he did have the fuzz.
Yeah.
The peach fuzz on the top of his head.
I think it could have been a fashion choice.
Because if so, then it just works for him. But his whole outfit just makes me think of a construction worker, actually. Like if he was to grow up, just a complete construction worker. And then not because of Plank being that catalyst for him being a construction worker, but just the idea of like the white shirt, blue pants. I could just see the yellow helmet on his head.
I know for me personally, speaking of school episodes, probably my favorite one is when they figure out what Kevin's afraid of. And they figure out he's afraid of needles.
Right.
So they make a giant oversized needle.
And
the golf club is the needle.
And the trash can's the big part.
Yeah. And they're just poking him with it. And he's just freaking out the entire time.
Well, I don't think they were able to poke him until the very end. But they were scaring him like beyond measure.
Yeah.
He was completely terrified. And like when I was growing up, I actually wasn't scared of needles, even in that time frame. I know other kids were, so the episode makes sense. But it didn't resonate with me because I was just more scared of like the pain. Yeah. I didn't like the pain aspect. I wasn't scared of getting poked. Yeah. Just the pain that followed, I wasn't very fun. That actually reminds me of how Johnny was ready to pull down his pants and have Double D give him the shot. He's like, make yourself decent, man. Like,
I remember that.
Johnny's the creep kid that's going to get arrested.
If I remember right, that's also the same episode where they're going through the files of students and they see a couple names of other characters that were supposed to be in the show.
Two of them. The other one was Big Jim, and Big Jim was one of the show's writers at the time. Oh, so yeah, Big Jim is actually consistent. Like even in the episode where they wanted to get to the Cankers, and I think it was because Eddie's brother had a map. And Eddie's ear happened to be the X marks the spot. Uh-huh. And so it was in the trailer park. Yeah. So they were trying to excavate underneath the Kanker's trailer. Yeah. And the shit that happened in that episode. But I kind of lost where I was going with that. But I do remember that they made it into the Kanker's house. But then they got into the bathroom, and they ran into on Marie in the actual tub, if you recall.
I actually don't remember that.
Because they pop out of the tub, and
it sounds like something they would
and bet your sweet bippity, like freaking, she freaks out, and then the two other sisters come in. I believe there's even a meme that we were submitted where they used that as a catalyst, and they just changed, like they. So like this is so and so, this is so and so, and it worked, but I didn't approve the image. But Well, I remember now why I brought that up is because Big Jim was in the filing cabinet that Double D used to find where the treasure was hid.
Yeah.
Like he had like a list of people that he had a file on, which honestly it sucks that we didn't get to revisit that file in another season or even a later episode for that matter, because I'm curious what he had on everybody. Because if you have a filing cabinet for your neighbors,
Yeah.
odds are you have documents in that file. So
Yeah.
what did he have on his neighbors? That's what I'm actually mainly curious about.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea.
I mean, that would be a good question to ask Sam Vincent, you know, if we get the chance to interview him. But, you know, going from that, I guess I could mention my favorite. My favorite still lasts to be the Christmas special. And it's just for the fact that the first scene we get with Ed is him tearing a whole damn chimney through the whole house from one side to the other. And he's just like, gravy cakes for Santa. Yum. And then the whole part where he's like, Santa, elf, Ed the elf. There, that's what he called himself. Ed the elf has fixed it. And he's like, and then Double D starts knocking on his window and he's like, Santa! Santa? Santa! And then freaking he destroys Double D's like thermo suit. Yeah. And he's like, I brought you what once was a poinsettia, Ed. And then I love it where he's like, hug? And Double D just gets mortified. He's like, don't matter. It's the season. Think happy thoughts. And then it sucks because that just reminds me of the episode where there was the stinky cheese in Ed's pocket. And he never got rid of it. I think the cheese was Sheldon. Well, no, I think he actually did get rid of it because Eddie threw it into the lake, which killed all the fish subsequently. Yeah. But then there was like there was a dead fish around his neck that he wore as a necklace. And he was like, Mort, my lucky Morton fishy, whatever he called it. And so just thinking back to that, it sucks that they didn't like reinforce that. So instead of Double D just being happy to see Ed, he was like more thinking of like, oh, I don't want to hug him, but he's going to hug him anyway because of the season. But I kind of hope that they would have had that callback to that episode, but I guess they didn't. So it's fine with me. But, you know, personal wish of mine, I suppose. Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, and even on top of that, like the episodes that came out were phenomenal. Edtropolis was probably my second favorite. It's when they built the whole city out of cardboard, if you recall.
Yeah. Don't they... Oh, I'm thinking of a different... I'm thinking of the one where they rebuilt Ralph's home village.
Oh, his home village.
Yeah.
And they made him smell the Ed's shoe, and knock him out. But yeah, Edtropolis remains my favorite because like they did I think they call it a fourth wall break when it comes to animation.
Yeah. And
what it was they're dropping yogurt as like a pigeon and they're going like coo coo. Yeah. Ed grabs an anvil and goes quack quack and just drops it. And Eddie's like, Ed, you're gonna hurt somebody. This ain't a cartoon. It's occasional. I freaking love it. Like, I do regret I wasn't able to ask when we had interviewed Matt Hill if a lot of those moments were improv. But I have a feeling there was a good chunk that was improv, but then also solid writing from like Sean Goodrich and Big Jim, of course, naturally speaking. But just overall, it was a good time for the show in my eyes. Like I know they had a lot of numbers. I don't know the significance of how many numbers they exactly had, but I do know that Cartoon Network's best year was the summer of 2004. It's when they made the Cartoon City, if you recall. Basically, they called them bumpers back then.
Yeah, I think I remember.
And you'd see the show, and then after the show ended, they'd have all these cartoons living in this town, Cartoon Network. And that actually just reminded me, they used to, when they showed movies on Fridays or just movies in general on Cartoon Network, didn't matter what the movie, whether it be an actual real life movie to a cartoon movie, they had all the cartoon characters that were on the station sit in the audience. So like you felt you were sitting with all those characters, you know, using that imagination of a kid, if you will. And they had a picture of when we were children to what they have now, and it's a significant difference.
Yeah.
Every seat is filled when we were kids. You could, like, Foster's, you had Codename Kids Next Door in there, you had Dexter's, Johnny Bravo, you name it. Even that weird, like, not the Cat and Dog, that was the Nickelodeon show, but it was like some kind of red guy.
Oh.
And then
it was
chicken.
Like a devil thing?
Yeah, some devil guy, and there was a chicken.
Cow and Chicken.
Cow and Chicken, that was the show.
Yeah.
Cow and Chicken, yeah. Even they, and I think their show was even discontinued by that point, but they were still on the air, I think, at least by reruns, but they were still included. And to see that difference now between the 90s to what we have now is kind of sad in its own right. But I guess even basic knowledge for you, if you weren't aware, I do know that the whole reason why all those shows started to occur was because they felt they gave the other animation studios enough time on the air. Like Ed, Edd n Eddy itself ended for its own right of losing, Paul Boyd, rest his soul. But the other shows were just basically they wanted to give the younger animators a shot. And then we had what we have today, which in my personal opinion, I do not like.
I don't like it either.
I mean, I liked the old Teen Titans. Indubitably, I loved the old Teen Titans. Did you ever see the old show?
I've watched. I remember watching here and there, but I have watched some of the newer ones more than I care to admit, and it is awful.
So
The newer Teen Titans.
so there was like a rumor that was spread, kind of a false rumor. What it was an artist drew something, and then someone took that and made fake news out of it, and it was like a reboot of Ed, Edd n Eddy. It was fake news, but it got the whiff to Erin Fitzgerald, the voice of Naz and May, and she made a comment on it. But if that would have been the true face, if you've seen the photo, do you think you would have liked a reboot? Because you go from what Ed, Edd n Eddy is as a whole, where Danny talks about how you make the lines and you give them depth and you give them life, to everything just being smooth. Would you think that would work for Ed, Edd n Eddy specifically, or do you feel you would like Danny's interpretation better?
I'm not sure. To be honest, I'd probably have to go with no, just because I've seen a lot of reboots. Like, take Teen Titans, for example. I just feel like I know they have well intentions, but I just feel like they could have done better, and it's a little disappointing. So to have it, like, rebooted and have a whole nother animation style, I feel like that's a really big risk, And I've just seen examples of other things, and they just flop. And a show like Ed, Edd n Eddy that I really care about, I wouldn't really want to see it flop like that.
Do you think, besides the animation style, do you think the comedy, if you will, would be different? Because I can tell you there's different standards for TV than there were when we were children.
Yeah.
There's a fine line, actually. There's certain things that you can't get away with. Like, when we were kids, there was more leeway. Even more in the 90s, more so. But around Ed, Edd n Eddy's end, I kind of stopped watching TV myself. After Ed, Edd n Eddy stopped, I only kind of knew about Chowder from Cartoon Network. Yeah. After that, nothing. Like, I just completely just went straight on to internet from there. Like, I didn't even care about TV anymore. Maybe because it was so expensive. That could have been a part of it. Because since other people were growing up in the early 2000s, they luckily were able to grow up a little bit with Ed, Edd n Eddy. They came late to the show, but they were still there for the ride. Yeah. And those folks, they kept watching TV, but at that point, I had a job. Yeah. I didn't have that ability to keep watching TV. Like, do you feel that you still had some time to watch Ed, Edd n Eddy in your free time? Or until you joined 90s Best Cartoons, did you really care again about Ed, Edd n Eddy? Like, where was your fall off, if you have one?
Well, for me, I did watch a lot of cartoons. To be honest, growing up, I kind of watched more Boomerang than Cartoon Network.
Boomerang, yeah, I'm familiar with that.
But every once in a while, I would still go over to Cartoon Network, and I get excited whenever I see Ed, Edd n Eddy come on, or Ben 10, the older Ben 10.
Right.
And then after kind of growing up some more, and then doing more school and stuff, I kind of dropped away from that and kind of went to different forms of animation. And then coming to 90s Best, I did kind of come back into Ed, Edd n Eddy, and seeing other cartoons, and just reviving my memory, basically.
Because you do forget.
Yeah.
It's been, I think it's already been, it's been 20 years since they started. Because it was in January, I forget the day. It could have been the 4th, 1998.
Yeah.
Or it could have been 1999. I think it's more of 99 when they started. But even then, they ended in 07. So that would make it 12, maybe 13 years.
Yeah.
Come 2022, it's going to be 15 years, I believe. So they've been off the air for quite some time. Which, I guess, like, in junior high, when I was growing up, I stopped kind of watching TV. And it was just mainly because my family were going towards more movies. And Netflix wasn't there yet, but Redbox was.
Yeah.
And I remember when Redbox started, Netflix and Redbox were actually fighting odds back then.
Yeah.
They were tiptoeing with each other. And then next thing you know, I wasn't really, but I never forgot, I can say, Ed and Eddie. It always stuck with me through all those years, and I'd make reference to it. The only sucky part was no one else really knew those references.
Yeah.
And the best part for me, I guess I could say, joining 90s Best Cartoons was when I joined, there was a whole different staff team. And the fact that I was able to make references with people again, and they knew they didn't think I was some idiot on the street. They knew exactly what I was talking about. Yeah. It was just a perfect representation of what Ed and Eddie stood for people. Because, like, people will join our Discord and they'll just be like, well, I'm excited to talk with people that love Ed and Eddie again, because it's not a niche, but there is a love for it.
Yeah.
There's very much a love.
Yeah.
And so, like, when you look at your own self, was it around junior high as well that you stopped, or was it high school that, like, TV wasn't that big of a thing for you?
Well, I still watched a lot of TV, but I guess it was kind of around like 7th, 8th, and 9th grade where I kind of got away from it.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Because my parents, they were watching The Simpsons and Futurama and King of the Hill, and I started watching that with them and really liking that, and I kind of went more in that direction.
You started to pivot towards, I guess you could call it, teenager to adult animation.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, and then going from middle school to high school, I started getting into anime, and then just kind of branching out from there. And
right,
that's
yeah.
a whole completely different direction from American animation.
To go to, I believe it's just Japan.
Yeah, Japanese.
Yeah. So not bad. Well, even though you were changing, you were going through those parts, did you ever feel like maybe like you never forgot Ed and Eddie? Like you never really forgot it?
No, not really. Like I will admit there was a ton of stuff that I did forget, and I remembered when I came into the group. But I just always remember that cartoon of, like, the 3 goofy guys with their colored tongues off doing weird and wacky adventures.
Okay. Then did you actually, so with the one episode being your favorite, where Ed takes charge, he does a scam from a comic book, or I guess a ritual was more of what he was doing, but he thought it meant a scam. Did you always remember that, or was it only like recently when you joined up that you had you remembered that episode?
That's probably only recently.
Only recently that you remembered it. So, do you recall the day that you actually saw the episode originally on TV?
No.
You do not? Okay.
No, I really don't.
All right. Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Well, let me jump over here to our next engagement here. So I guess that just makes me wonder then. Out of all the years combined, did you ever have like a personal favorite character exactly?
In the Ed and Eddie show?
Yeah, of course, and Ed and Eddie.
For me, I'd have to go with Ed. He's just this big, goofy guy who, I mean, yeah, he's not the sharpest knife in the toolbox or whatever it is.
I could tell the fighting of All-Star there.
Yeah.
I knew you were fighting that. We'll continue, sorry.
But he's smart in his own different way, and I always liked that. He was just this lovable guy who's always cheerful.
He's after your own heart.
Yeah, he's just a goofy guy. Like, you see him and yeah, maybe he's covered in grease or dirt or something, but you just want to give him a hug.
Yeah.
Because he has this innocence about him, and he just wants to spend time with his friends. That's all he wants to do.
That sounds like because even when Eddie went undercover and he became Carl because Double D was calling him a no-neck chum. Like, he was just loving Carl. And he's like, Eddie's gonna love you, Carl.
Yeah.
He was always willing to accept new people in his life.
Yeah. And, I mean, for me personally, growing up, I was a little bit antisocial. And so
then who do you see yourself? Like, think about all the characters in Ed and Eddie. You know, every single one. Hey, throw in Plank in there for just the hell of it. Where do you say you stand? Like, who resonated? Like, as you grew up, who did you start out as much as? Then teenagers years, like, who were you like the most? And then think of it from adult. Out of all those characters again, who were you?
Oh, that's tough. Well, I guess growing in like my kiddie years, I'd probably be more like Johnny, just
an annoying guy with a piece of wood.
Not even like
and not even in the literal sense, not even the literal.
I
sense.
think for me, it was because I was off, kind of doing my own thing, like Johnny kind of does, and he's just off with Plank
on his own little adventure.
Yeah. Just playing with his toy, and for me, I didn't really go to like friends' places and stuff a lot. I just hanged out at my own place, just playing with my own toys.
I share that a little bit, that same synergy with you there. I was kind of a loner myself. Then yeah, in teenagers years, where did you see yourself as?
Well, going into like middle school when it's all awkward and stuff. Probably Jimmy.
You were Jimmy.
He's a little bit awkward, and you can tell puberty's gonna hit that kid like a truck.
Well, you could say that, but do you remember like all the parts of Jimmy where people like they don't really put their faith into him, but then he starts to become a little evil there, and he becomes nothing short of what I would consider a psychopath to be.
Yeah.
And he turns just full on gangsta on the meds. So do you feel like maybe that resonates as well with your teenage years? Did you become an all-out gangster?
Well, I wouldn't say an all-out gangster, but I do have my moments where I'll just get really pissed off at something.
Okay.
But besides that, I'll just be chill, doing kind of my own thing, hanging out with like one other person maybe.
This is just where you see yourself.
A little bit, and then.
Okay, well then, adulthood. Which one? Like, if you say Naz, I'll be concerned. But if you do you have one in general? You're like, oh my gosh, that's like. If you also say Eddie, I'll be a little worried there because he was always so mischievous. I guess he's not anymore, but granted, that was what he was most of the show.
Well, I know for a fact I'm not Eddie because he's a team leader and I cannot lead.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know. That's kind of tough.
All right. Well, we don't have any person to talk to us to ask us the questions.
Yeah.
So I'll go the one further while you're thinking of that. I guess for me, when I was a little youngster, little shenanigan, I was actually probably Jimmy, because Love and Behold, and he's also my favorite character.
Yeah.
But Love and Behold, I was by myself. When I would hang out with somebody, it was actually my sister. So I guess Sarah kind of a little bit fits like that, but it was not someone else's sister. It was my sister.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm not so much of it now, but back then I was a very good liar. Like my nephew, I could swear that he's not that good of a liar, and so you'll see him try to lie, and he's very easily caught. I was not caught, and that's actually the bad part, because not getting caught for something like lying, it starts to boil down to bad lessons learned later. Yeah. And those bad lessons are usually harder. Oh, excuse me, I just burped. They're harder because the situation is different. Yeah. It got to the point where I had lied at an arcade about losing $10 to a video game, and the arcade gave the money back. So that's where that psychopath kind of resonates a little bit. Like I was on a roll, and then it got to the point where I tried it $50, not in the same night, but a whole different scenario, if you will.
Yeah.
But doing that finally caught up to me, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to stop doing that. And the best part about it was that it could have been worse.
Yeah.
Infinitely, it could have been worse, but luckily, it wasn't. So, I guess for me as an adult, probably Double D. I'm a little bit more sophisticated. I like my vocabulary.
Yeah.
I do enjoy. I'm not the best at English, but I am better at math. Like if you could tell, like if I told you where to put a comma in a sentence, I'd get it wrong.
Yeah.
Run-on sentences, I'm guilty. But math, you give me an algebra question, or sometimes maybe even depending on how deep it is, calculus, I could get you to the answer. You know, it's good. And so that's me. So with me saying that, do you have one then as an adult? Because you have that whole arsenal. There's 12 characters in total in Ed, Ed, and Eddie. I'll label them off for you. I'll try to help you here, okay? You got Ed, you got Double D, you got Eddie, you have the Canker sisters, May, Lee, Marie, right? You got Plank, you got Johnny, you got Sarah, you got Naz, you got Kevin, Rolf. Could you be like Rolf?
No. Rolf has the work ethic that I do not have.
Perfect.
That
Freaking
man
perfect.
can work 24 hours straight, 7 days a week, and I'll work for like a couple hours and be done.
Okay. Perfect. Well, even saying those names, does anyone besides Rolf, does any of those like resonate with you? Any extent of the word. It doesn't even have to be good.
I don't even know. It's really hard. I want to say maybe, for some reason, either Ed or Kevin. Just because, like, Kevin doesn't really have a whole lot of patience for stuff. And I've noticed that, like, kind of, this probably isn't a good thing for me, but as I get older, I kind of run out of patience for things.
Do you feel like that slows you down? Because like in Ed, Ed and Eddie, you know, every character, you know, has their weaknesses.
Yeah.
But those weaknesses can also eventually become their strengths.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've learned from that, especially even from Ed and Eddie? Because when you say anger, that just makes me think of Sarah and Eddie. And they were always very quick to anger people.
Well, I'm not really quick to anger. I just get irritated, and then I'm irritated for a while.
So you could even be Kevin.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying Kevin. I think I'll have to go with Kevin.
Okay, because he holds a grudge. But if they apologize to you, because like Kevin, if you apologize to him, you know, he makes it up.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that resonates with you as well?
I do try to get over it, you know, and if somebody apologizes, I'll calm down.
Like that helps the weight of the situation.
Yeah, it'll help me calm down a little bit. I try not to hold grudges against people because that's just not how I was raised.
Right.
I was raised to forgive people. So I do try to forgive people, but as for trusting them again, that's kind of a different thing.
There's like a whole different segue to it.
Yeah.
Like there's just different ways it works and different ways it flows. And with even that being said, it looks like we got Zachy joining us. So let's change some settings here and we'll get him into the call. Let's see. Let me set this up so we can hear him. I think it'll be working once he joins. Check something here. Input. We're going to set to that. Okay, yeah, there we go. Let's see. Come on. Well, I guess while we're waiting for him to join, I'll keep an eye out for this. Even going like a little bit further away from that, like what's a lesson that Ed, Ed and Eddie has taught you that you feel could stick with you for the rest of your life?
Well, one lesson, and this is kind of the overall lesson. I've always noticed how Double D and Eddie, the way they treat Ed, and like other characters, they kind of get mad at him easy, and they'll give him crap. But the other Ed boys, they just kind of accept him for who he is, and they kind of just let him do his own thing. And then he'll do something and they're like, oh, that's just what he does, you know.
Right.
And I like that because I really like that because I mean I know in my life personally, there's times where I'll be messing up, and then it's just nice to have a friend who's, you know, patient with you and understanding and just overall accepting. And I've always admired Eddie and Double D for the way they accepted Ed.
Yeah, I get what you're saying because in season 5, they there was a lot more of that relationship building. If the show had continued on to what it was going towards, one of the things that I do know they were running towards at that time was more of because scams were over with at that point.
Yeah.
School. They were moving on to more personal relationships between the characters.
Yeah.
And to fill that catalyst, to fill how as they grew up together, they were more accepting of one another, and even more, they were easy to forgive each other.
Yeah.
They still had arguments. Like no friendship is perfect,
Yeah.
but they still were able to create that bond, and I think that's perfect.
Like another example of how their bond works is we know Double D is such a germaphobe, and he loves things neat and tidy, and then Ed's just such a counter. He's just so opposite from that, and then they're always going to each other's houses. Like you always see Double D in Ed's room, even though Ed's room is just a total mess.
Yeah, he goes there anyway because they're friends.
Because he cares about him, he doesn't let the way Ed lives hold him back from spending time with him, and
right.
he just lets him do his thing.
Okay, yeah, I like.
Hello.
And hi there, Zachy. So everyone who's watching this, Zachy's joining in. So Zachy, while we're talking here for a minute, let's give you some questions that we've already answered, and then you can answer them when you're able to. And feel free to jump in, anytime. What the questions was as you were growing up, out of all 12 members in the cast, there could be 13, so forgive me. Who were you as a child? Who were you as a teenager? And who were you as an adult? And then the reasons why attached to that.
Out of all, wait, what was the question?
So out of the whole cast,
okay,
who were you as a child? Who were you more like as a teenager? And who were you more like as an adult? And the reasons why.
Okay, definitely like Matt Hill because he was extreme and active, and I live a active and healthy lifestyle.
Right, and you have those workouts that you do.
Yeah, and I've always been active and healthy ever since being a child. I was always out and getting there because like back then, like television, they would always tell you turn off the computer and go outside.
Yeah, I do remember that. The parents were always very about that. I think it was even like a nutrition course for children at the time.
Right. And knowing the fact that he's still very active, like I feel like it was like something that I grew up in in its entirety. So I've been active and healthy all of my life, except for the time where I got fat.
Okay, well, even that happening, did you ever did you have any other instances where you felt like you were any other character, or was it just Ed through the whole thing?
Ed in particular, because if we're speaking character wise, then he had the same imagination as I did. Like he liked comic books and other things like that. And then there was Matt Hill, who had like the healthy and the radical and extreme and.
Yeah, I guess we're just speaking more of because the actors, they're all really cool people, but
Yeah.
we're thinking more of like the characters from the show. So when you so if someone was a lawyer, I'd instantly call them Eddie, just as a joke. But
because they're loud and short.
given the circumstances, probably yes or no. It just give or take. But
you can go either way.
But even think of that. Let's take a wing out here. Because you never got to meet Tim, Charlie. You never got to meet him.
No.
But knowing from what little you knew about him, what would you consider him to be? Humor me. What would you Like, what character do you think he would be the most like?
Okay, you might have to actually jog my memory a little
Like Tim?
bit. Yeah.
Well, he helped found 90s Best Cartoons. He brought me on eventually, and then he left. But I guess now I'm answering your own query because I thought you had remembered a little bit about him.
Yeah, no, I remember now. I'm just
Because he actually was a lawyer, so.
Well, it'd probably either be Eddie or Double D, because it takes us. Lawyers are really smart people, and we know Double D's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah,
And
he definitely is.
Well, probably more Double D than Eddie, actually.
Okay.
Here's why. Because Double D, he's the brains behind everything, and Tim, he's the guy that set all this up.
Yeah.
Which is something that Double D would probably do.
Could Tim be the unseen principal from the later seasons of Ed and Eddie?
Oh, sorry, no. Tim is basically the founder of 90s Best Cartoons.
No, I know, I've met him. But I'm saying, like, could he be the unsung hero, the person who gets detention in the background, like, yeah.
Oh my gosh!
I can't believe I got detention. I don't remember doing that.
Even he could very well be that principal, the guy that like he helped start it up, so he was a bit like Double D, but then he really helped like this, like not only like from the show, he helped the school be managed.
Yeah.
He helped manage the whole foundation of everything. Like, I wish that office was still open today. So yeah, I guess he is kind of the unsung hero. And even that being said, like it just makes me freaking like laugh because I forgot about this, and I think you did too, Charlie. When I mentioned Rolf earlier about like you being as an adult, we forgot one pivotal thing. He was an urban ranger.
Right.
And so he had that standard of like living up to help build one's community. Like I don't even remember what, like they had a pamphlet in season 5 that they like opened up for the whole school, and you like could see their core values.
Yeah.
I do not remember. Do you or Zachy remember what it said? Because I do not recall what it said, but it had their core values on it.
Their urban ranger core values?
Yeah, like when Eddie fought Rolf for the what was the badge? It was, I don't even remember what the badge was called.
Manliness?
I just remember him winning the Cry Baby Boo Hoo.
Yeah, that's the only one I remember, the Crybaby Boo Hoo. But they were fighting over the Hairless Chest of Resilience badge. Got it.
Yeah, that one. Yeah,
or the hairy chest, not the hairless.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly the core things, but I know they were like very skewed, but they had their own sense of justice. Like they were like super justified in what they were doing. Like they wanted to help the community, but they did it in such a way where it's like you get a badge for just about anything.
I'm actually wondering, like, because there's, we almost need to open up communication with them, but there's actually an urban ranger, like a real life group put together, and almost ask them, like, because if they're that far into it and they live the code, I'm hoping they know the code, because then they could tell us, because I'd have to either rewatch the episode or just someone know off the top of their head, but I might have to rewatch it.
I actually forgot about the Urban Rangers.
Because, like, Johnny was... So you had Johnny, you had Plank, you had Jimmy, and you had Rolf. Yeah. Who Rolf, I guess, was... like, we all did scouts, right? Like, I was part of the scouts. I didn't get any badges, though.
I made it all the way to Eagle.
So you got all the way through.
Yeah.
So what did they call someone like Rolf in the scouts? What would it... Like, do they just call it a troop leader? Like, what is their name?
Something like that. I can't remember. Oh my gosh. I know there is a name.
Like, they have a title, obviously.
I just can't remember what it was.
It blanks my memory, too.
Or maybe...
Apparently, they've been... apparently, the Urban Rangers have been around for 50 years, canonically, in the series.
So there's actually, like, even more so.
Yeah.
Where... if you're looking at Google, does it say where they're located?
The Urban Rangers Club, the corpse is located Kansas City, Missouri.
Because yeah, like I know the show was made in Canada, but if it was actually in Canada, then that begs the question. And then I'm like, well, they obviously loved Canada because even Ed had a few lines where he was like, Canadians are weird, but they live in Canada. Oh my goodness. Because like there was a few fans that would like question us and be like, hey, like the show's in Canada. It's like, well, it was made in Canada, but the cul-de-sac was definitely an American suburb, and like all the people that live there. Because like Rolf, I guess that does kind of emphasize that type of kid when we were growing up, and honestly, like I think that is really cool that it showed like someone outside of the country that was trying to live and grow inside America, because it showed the land of opportunity, which we used to stand for.
Yeah.
I believe we still stand for, but the more values have lowered, because like we've lost the community balances we used to have, unless the urban rangers are in America. Like,
I know for me personally, the closest thing to urban rangers is scouting.
Is scouting? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure urban rangers is a real thing, but I also know that BSA isn't just in America; it's all over the world, which kind of surprises me. But
so did they rename it? So like if it was Canada, that would be BSC instead of BSA?
I don't know how they name it in other countries, but I just know in America specifically, it's Boy Scouts of America.
Right.
And then there's Girl Scouts of America. I don't know if Girl Scouts is all over the world as Boy Scouts is.
According to Wikipedia, the urban rangers in Etta and Eddie have 4 ranks: Wee Roach, Ranger, Leader, and Grand Poobah of the International Urban Rangerhood.
So would that make Rolf the Grand Poobah?
I think it would
No,
it
would be the person who created the Urban Rangers. I think he's just a leader.
He's just the leader of the troop that's in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Yeah.
Then I'm now kind of sad that they didn't have an episode where the Urban Rangers competed against other Urban Rangers. That would be an episode I would love to see.
Yeah.
Like, now thinking about that.
Boy Scouts kind of does do that, too.
Well, yeah, they have competitions.
Yeah.
But, like, what the Urban Rangers did, like, when they were having fall cleanup, they went around and they cleaned their neighbors' yards of leaves. And they also cleaned the gutters. Which that was a good thing to do, You're showing the newer generation that was, we talked about the early 2000s kids earlier, that even though they were late to the party, they were there for it. And, like, they, at that point of the show, got to see those later seasons. And so they were able to see that, where it's like, I'm hoping that a lot of the populace was able to keep those core values, help your neighbors, build your community up. Because that was what the cul-de-sac really did. I mean, they weren't perfect people. Nobody is. But they were willing to work with each other. Even in the end. Grudges and those kind of things are the only things holding them back, honestly.
Yeah.
But, honestly, I'm also curious, Zach. So, we had already discussed it. Do you have a favorite episode, like, that has really resonated with you?
The day that the Ed stood still.
Yeah, we talked about that one on a previous cut. What was your favorite moment from that then?
Oh my gosh! As soon as he puts on the helm, like the head, and then Dovey leaves, and then his eyes start turning red.
We had mentioned it sort of before, but we talked about when Ed had the ritual, which he thought was a scam. Bringing back Evil Tim. Evil Tim. Did you see a comparative from the day that Ed stood still to a real life horror flick? Because Double D says, and I quote, he must have got this out of a movie that he's seen. Because when we talked about it, Ben mentioned that he thought it was more of Alien. Is that what you? Yeah, Alien. Do you have something else that you think of when you see what he did with Chunky Puffs?
Either Alien or The Thing, or there's... I think it's a combination out of a lot of different ones.
That that Danny compiled into one.
Yeah, there's a lot of them compiled into one. You could mention Killer Clowns from Outer Space, because if you remember, they're all wrapped in cotton candy.
Oh right. I do remember one of the comic books in the Ed and Eddie universe was Inappropriate Pictures from Beyond, which was only showcased, I think, from the special, with the
Yeah,
aliens. I
especially
could be
with
wrong.
the green thing or whatever.
Yeah, like it had like a weird elephant nose, and it was inappropriate pictures. But I think that was the only time we actually saw it, because until that moment we would have to like freeze frame. Back then, without a DVR, that was nearly too impossible. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I think there's even on the Wikipedia, it shows every single comic book that was showcased. Like not what was inside, but at least the cover.
Yeah.
Because even so, like if you watch Boo Ha Ha, Ed has all of those movies stacked up everywhere in his room, and that begs the question, like, what did they name some of them? Because there's that sticky note in Double D's bathroom that reads, "Don't touch yourself," that his parents left for him in the bathroom. And then one of the fans found, I guess in the garage, it said lube on like a glass container. Which I was like, okay, humor me, it's probably for like a bike or something like that.
Yeah.
But the sexual innuendo was definitely there.
Yeah.
Oh well, then maybe the next part should be, what was your favorite sexual joke or sexual innuendo that they did?
It's dark.
Yes. Yes. Oh my word. Yes. Well, think about one, Charlie. What comes to mind?
Well, no, I know what that joke is, I think.
Oh, well, that's from the reverse psychology. Because he was chasing them. He's like, "Dial me for love." And then after that, they run into the closet. And he's like, "It's dark." That's occasional. Oh, my word. But, yeah, even that. Does that help spark your memory a bit? Like think about all, like... There's in that same episode, he grabs, I think it was Marie's hand, and just eats it. Like, doesn't...
Is that the same one where Double D tells Ed, "Don't eat the dirt"?
Yes.
He wants to eat it.
It was the beginning of the episode where he wanted to show Eddie what he was talking about.
Yeah. And he's like, "Ed, don't eat that.
Listen carefully now."
And then he looks
Do
over
not
and
grab
he's all
Eddie.
sweaty.
Oh yeah, he's like, "Ed, don't get Eddie." And then his legs start up and you hear the sound. I think they even used like a train. So like you really got the full effect that Ed was going to get him no matter what.
Yeah.
Ed, do not eat that dirt.
Yeah, and I just love the part from that episode as well where he's like, "Let's pitch some Lou."
I think I know my favorite.
Okay, what do you got?
And I know me and you have talked about it before. It's when Sarah and Jimmy are trying to figure out where babies come from. You already know where it is.
Yes! Continue, I love it.
And so Double D decides to do the birds and the bee talk. So
Yeah.
they build this giant beehive thing, and Double D's just in this bee costume. And he has a
I'm
stinger,
Buzzy Buzzlebee!
and he stings. Who does he sting?
He stings Eddie.
Yeah.
But the fact that he just swivels his butt and then stings Eddie is one of the best moments I've ever seen in a cartoon. Like,
You know, at the end of that episode, Ed actually flies to.
yeah, he turns
drop
into a
Ed off
stork.
Yeah, and then fucking beeping Double D. He sits there and he's like, "Ed, how'd you do that?"
And then he's like this, Double D, and of course he couldn't replicate it.
Yeah.
And I just, oh my word. And the fact, like, he flew anyway. He didn't care. He was
Yeah.
flying. But, oh my gosh, I'm hurt from smiling already too much. Because, like, oh my gosh, I will never forget that swivel. And, like, Rolf, I swear, even though, bless the kids that might listen to this, ask your parents at a certain age, do that in your own time, your own way. But Rolf knew. Where, like, he got the fire. He's like, "Are you ready to hear the tradition of Rolf's forefathers? You are children. Go away." Like, like he knew.
Yeah.
I swear he knew. And it sucks because, like, I know Naz knew. Because she's, like, even though she plays dumb, she's actually a very smart character.
Wasn't she laughing?
Yeah, she thought it was humorous.
Like, so
And Kevin was embarrassed.
Sarah and Jimmy, they go to Kevin.
Well, they're
and-
like, "Our fishies had babies." And Naz is like, "Aw, that's rad, Jimmy."
They were laughing. They're like, "Where do babies come from?"
Yeah, Yeah, it's just, and then freaking like Kevin, like I swear he had a feeling he knew, but he starts blushing and he's like, they fall from trees like apples. And it's freaking Naz just can't hold in her laughter.
Who didn't know was Sarah and Jimmy.
Everybody they are younger. Like I can't put them on a scale because we don't know. Even though Danny had his whole wonderful vision, everything was beautifully in his head. It wasn't really disclosed how old they were, but I feel like they were maybe 2 or 3 years behind everybody else. Rolf probably being the oldest with that back hair, but gosh golly, like if I had to give them like an actual number, I believe in my heart that Rolf was 13, followed by Ed, then maybe Kevin. Double D feels like he was that middle child. If he had siblings, I feel like he would have been a middle child. Like he just had like everything that resonated about him. How he talked with his parents when he could, even though it was only through sticky notes. It just resonates middle child. Yeah. Not only middle and Ed and Nettie, but still, it just feels like that would be the case. Yeah. And, just that freaking swivel. I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. And I guess moments as well, like I didn't even mention it, but a fan favorite, and it has its own place in my heart, is when they did Eddie's Cruise, where they were trying to do a tire swing, but the swing went awry, so the whole tire fell into the river, which I think they called it the creek. That's why it was called Peach Creek. They had peach trees, and then there was the creek. Yeah. So Peach Creek. And they tried, riding in it, which I love that friggin' episode, because you get 88 Fingers Edward, which was a great moment. I love that moment. And then another moment from the episode that like resonated with me, and even the fans, was probably when they were fighting the Kinkers trying to get away. Yeah. And the fact that the Kinkers had managed to build a mattress and it floated. I know it's a cartoon, but humor me if you will. Surely that would work if there was actually something holding in, stopping the water from getting into the mattress.
I think mattresses float.
Do they actually float just on their own?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
That'd be the first I've heard of it, but I'm not against it. I like it.
I've seen it in like TV shows and movie where it's just a mattress floating, just how it is.
So in Titanic, why was Jack not finding a mattress? No, I'm kidding.
I don't know.
Well, bringing it back to like Ed and Eddie, I guess the Urban Rangers, they were cool. You had Kevin, who was like a bike fanatic, and then I remember the episode where they had tried selling a bike to Kevin, and he started like duking it out, and Double D was like, "You're not supposed to do that," and then he scraped his back. That was like the cringiest moment, because he got up and his whole back was just black. Even the back of his head, like he was completely burned from what happened to him.
I want to ask you guys this question. What's, in your opinion, the most disgusting moment?
In Ed and Eddie?
Yeah.
The most disgusting for me would probably have been when they wanted to get Kevin. And I don't remember what Eddie was so pissed about, which wanted him to get Kevin so badly. But they went undercover. And he wanted Double D to just go up and hit him. He's like, I'm not going to just hit him. Eventually they gave Double D his sack lunch. Like Ed's old sack lunch. And it was awful. There was fungi coming off of that thing. And he was about to throw it on, he was about to hit Kevin with it. And then it exploded all over him. I did not like that. No way. No.
I know for me, there's the times where they go into the sewer. Don't they try and set up a ride in the sewers?
Yeah, all the boys went go-karting. So it was just the Eds and then Jimmy and Sarah and Naz.
Yeah, they try to get him a ride in the sewers.
The swamp ride, I think that's what. And Ed was actually in the water.
Yeah.
Oh, but he was being oh, that's gross. Oh, maybe. No, what? I got it. The one where the power goes out. And so they were blaming the underground mole mutants.
Yeah, that's another one.
And Ed, Double D got stuck in the water.
He comes out
and it was seeping into his shoes. Like, oh my, that is so disgusting.
I remember he comes out of the water and he's just covered.
Yeah, he looks like a underground mole mutant.
Yeah.
Freaking Ed, de-skulled, and inside his head is just buttered toast. It's just, oh my gosh, there's so many good moments.
That's
Just growing
hilarious.
up with the show was just, and the best part is like seeing how there's so many other fans. Like, when I joined '90s Best, I didn't like I knew that there was fun to be had with Ed and Eddie, but I didn't know how far it actually had gone. Like that is
Yeah.
just amazing to me. Just like to just see it. There's so many freaking fans. Like today we passed 12,000, over 12,000 followers,
Uh-huh.
and we're over 1,000 likes. So there's so many people.
That's insane.
Yeah,
How big it got.
it's a big number. It is a very big number, and it's only going to get bigger. And just to see, like, have Fantastical Friday to like remind us of these great moments. I guess it just segues us into the next part, which is our next podcast when we have it, guys, is going to be Dexter's Laboratory, which is going to give, frankly, because I know a little bit about that show, but it's going to give Charlie more of a chance to remember it because I remember parts, and I bet even you, Zachy, you know more than I with Dexter's Lab, but I need to rewatch it a little bit.
Yeah, it's all good. I used to watch it religiously, so.
The only episode I know from Heart is the Dad's Trophies episode.
Oh,
That's
that meme.
that's what I always think of. Well, we were able to go for about an hour with this podcast. I'm glad with the conversations we had, and next week Thursday we'll be doing another one. So I hope we
Sounds
get
good
everyone
to me.
here to, even if more, more the merrier, to talk about Dexter's Lab, and I'm excited about that.
And I'll be here on time.
Oh yeah, no worries, no worries. We're all just happy to be here together. All right, well, with
Yeah.
that, thank you, everyone. If you've watched the podcast, or I guess listened to it to this point, thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night,
All
guys.
right, see ya. Bye.